Okay, well, so first of all, I'd like to thank you for doing this interview for the journal and for the website. It's a great pleasure to have you here at the AGM, and your talk yesterday was very interesting, so thank you. We'll talk about that in a minute. First of all, I'd like to ask what you consider to be the main difference between teaching teens, adults and young learners.
Well, let me first of all say that I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. It's always great to be back at the ETAS AGM. Well, I mean, there are obvious differences, like age differences, but I think the main differences you're saying, or the main differences you're saying, are about development and cognitive development, of course. One model that I found extremely insightful is Kieran Egan's theory of human development, where he says that as human beings we go through developmental processes that are somehow similar to or that draw on what we have gone through as humankind in our cultural history. And he talks about children having these mythic thinking qualities. So they understand the world through polarities. What is important for them is strong emotional contrasts, like good versus evil, generous versus greedy, etc., etc., etc. So they need stories that somehow have these qualities in them in order to be able to develop what Vygotsky called their cognitive tools. Then, if you look at teenagers, adolescents, they go through a phase that Kieran Egan calls romantic understanding. It's a beautiful term.
Yeah,
not always.
My teens don't seem that romantic.
No, exactly. It's actually not always a beautiful phase in their lives. He calls that phase romantic because it's a very emotional phase. It's a phase of insecurity, basically. I mean, they're so cool on the outside, and deep down they're very insecure because the world is a threatening place for them in a way. They need the security of the peer group, but they don't very often share their insecurities with other people. So in terms of content and the content that is relevant for teenagers or for adolescents, it's about stories that are about heroes and heroines, because they need, because of their own insecurity, they want to be in contact with human qualities such as courage, creativity, love, genius, etc., etc. Qualities that they feel or think we need in order to succeed in a threatening world. So obviously, when you compare young children with adolescents, early teens, one difference is the kind of content that is relevant to them. The content that is relevant to them is one of the most important things in ELT, because it's something that engages students emotionally. And then when you look at teens in pre-university years, this is a phase that Kieran Egan calls the philosophic layer in their development, where they start developing an interest in theory and theories. And then finally the developed adult thinker, he calls the ironic thinker. In other words, it's a sophisticated state of mind where we are able to still draw on all the qualities of the previous layers, but at the same time we are able to think in a more sophisticated way. Now the interesting thing is that each of these different quality stages has different needs, different cognitive needs, different content needs, and if these needs are not met, students don't develop further. So for a lower adolescent student to go to their next phase, to go to the philosophic phase, what we need to give them the right content and engage them in the right activities so their cognitive development can actually go further. So those for me are the main differences.
And so they're developing in life and in the English classroom as a parallel.
Absolutely.
Yeah. With Mario Rinvolucri, you wrote a book on the use of multiple intelligence in the English classroom. Do you think that's still relevant to teaching young learners today?
Well, I think what I would like to say here, because the MI theory has recently been the focus of a lot of criticism. Some people have said, you know, we need to debunk it because it's pseudoscience, etc., etc., etc. I have always said, and we're saying that also in our books, that it's not about testing people, whether they are visual or whether their intelligence.
And if you are
is
visual, you cannot be auditory.
Exactly. It's not about sort of putting them in boxes, so to speak, and then teaching each student according to their intelligence. We found Howard Gardner's model a very useful and actually simple model. People are different. People are different in their preferences, in their cognitive preferences, in the way they process information. If we manage to include a multiplicity of methods, of ways of activating our students, we will reach out to them more easily. And this is what we are actually doing, I think, in our book, Multiple Intelligences in ELT. And the activities we have developed there, they activate students, they help the teacher to engage students in conversations, etc., by actually appealing to differences in ways of thinking and so on. I think that's important to actually state that it's not a scientific method where people are actually tested and put in different categories.
Yeah, and I think especially in the teen classroom, all the students enjoy doing a variety of activities, and this is one way of giving them that variety. Some activities will please different students more.
Yeah. And another thing that is important, you know, I mean, we all have our weaknesses and strengths. And if you think of a teenage student, and let's say you have a student whose weakness is mathematics, talking to them about weaknesses and strength can actually be very supportive in terms of saying, look, we all have our weaknesses. And here's a model that explains, you know, you can still be an intelligent person.
Yeah.
And, you know, even if in one area you're not as strong as others. And that's the other, I think, you know, positive thing about the MI model, that it says that our intelligences, call them capabilities or whatever, they are not something that is set in stone. They can be developed. They can be, you know, you can actually increase your capabilities, you can improve your capabilities.
And they might not be academic. That's what I appreciate. You
Absolutely.
might not be good at maths or language, in which case school is quite a difficult place to be.
Yes. Yeah.
But that's one of the advantages of the English classroom. We can still talk about what you're good at.
Right.
If you had to choose, which age group would you prefer teaching?
I don't have any particular age group. I mean, I find it very inspiring to teach different age groups, and also I write materials for different age groups actually.
At yesterday's keynote speech, you talked about engaging students emotionally. How do you feel this is different from engaging them with motivation?
I think it's a precondition in a way. I mean, there's no motivation without emotional engagement. And if you look at you know, some of the very interesting latest findings in neurobiology, I mean, James Zull actually says that our brain is an organ of emotion. When students deal with content that is relevant for them, when students sense that they're making progress in their learning, when they understand that what they're learning is actually useful and relevant for their future development, when students feel they're at least partially in control of their own learning process, then they're emotionally engaged, and when they're emotionally engaged, they are more motivated to learn, obviously.
To what extent do you think recent approaches such as Dogma can be used in the teen classroom?
I personally think that Dogma is something that is a quality of teaching more than an approach. I personally think it's a very useful reminder of something that is extremely important in language teaching, that it's not the material, and it's not the techniques, and it's not the language as such that is the most important thing in the classroom. What is most important is what's going on inside and between the people in the classroom, as Earl Stevick used to say. So it's the focus has to be on the relationships in the classroom and on what people bring to the classroom. And I personally, I'm a course book writer, I don't believe that we can do without materials. There are, of course, teachers who are able to do that. There are teachers who don't have to teach, the amount of hours that most teachers have to teach. So I think we need materials. Materials need to support the teacher in reaching out to the students. Materials need to be relevant to students so that they are emotionally engaged and they use the language talking as themselves. So I think there should not be one single lesson without what I would call Dogma quality. And in a podium discussion that I was in on at IATEFL last year, Luke Meddings also agreed. He said that he doesn't think that a dogma-only approach is actually possible. But we agreed on this dogma quality, I think. And I think the other thing, that Dogma has reminded us of is that how important it is to sort of forget the idea of learning as an error-free process. That is impossible. We need error-welcoming modes of education. And this is another important thing about Dogma.
Yeah. What advice would you give to somebody who is about to start teaching teenagers?
Certainly, it's one of the biggest challenges we can meet as teachers. On the other hand, of course, it can be extremely inspiring, and it can be a wonderful thing to create that classroom culture that students want to belong to. So if a teacher is actually prepared to spend time on the development of what I would call classroom culture, this kind of quality that allows for the development of responsibility in the classroom, allows for students to actually interact with each other and with the teacher in an authentic way by saying what they feel and by saying what they think, and a teacher who respects the young person as a person, then I think being a teacher of teenagers can actually be a very rewarding experience. So I would think, to come back to your question, what advice would I give? Well, if you can still remember what it was like to be a teenager yourself, think of those days and help them in their development. Because, as I said previously, being a teenager is not always very easy. They need support from us, and they need patience. And I think, another piece of advice, they need a teacher who's got a good sense of humor. That is something that is very important also. A teacher who can laugh with them, but also can laugh about herself.
At themselves, yeah. I saw that you were interested in running and photography. Do you find time for these hobbies when you're travelling? Because I've noticed you travel a lot for conferences.
Yeah, well, I'm very lucky and privileged in many ways, but it's also it is time intensive. With running, it's brilliant because you don't need a lot of equipment to go running. So I often go running in the morning.
Trainers.
I take my trainers, and I go running in the morning. And other things like photography. I love photography, but I don't have a lot of time for that. So that is like for 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Choices to be made.
Yeah.
Okay. Finally, if you were interviewing Herbert Puchta, what question would you ask him?
Okay. Well, maybe, what about your recent publications and current projects?
Oh, okay. So what are your recent current projects I'd be interested in hearing about?
Current projects, I'm currently involved in a course book for adult learners. The first few levels have just come out. Empower.
Yes.
Together with an excellent group of co-authors, Craig Thane, Adrian Doff, Jeff Straggs and Peter Lewis-Jones. So that's one project. I'm also working on a very exciting book for teachers with neurobiologist James Zal. Our working title being something like The Brain, Emotions and Language Learning, and that I'm learning a lot from this collaboration myself at the moment. And I'm also at the same time, because that's always important for me, working on different projects. I'm working on a resource book at the moment on how to teach very young children. So very different.
That seems to be a new upcoming thing in EFL, that children are learning younger and younger, definitely.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And it's a very important area because there's a tendency to start, at a younger age, and at the same time there is a lot of research that shows if it's not done properly, it's basically useless. It's a waste of time and funds and energy, and so I think we need to do it well. And we need to learn from what research actually shows.
And do you think that will have a follow-on effect? Because if we're teaching children from a very young age, but then starting again when they're 6 and again when they're 11, I sometimes get this feeling that every time they change schools, they start again. So
and
are they developing?
That's how it shouldn't be done.
Yeah.
And I think if it's done like that, it is a bit useless. I mean, we need to do it properly. We need to learn from research. There's an enormous amount of research into what is the best age of starting a foreign language and how should it be done actually. And we need to learn from that research. So that's something I'm working on.